Roronoa Zoro is one of the most beloved characters in One Piece. Not only is he almost always right behind Luffy in popularity polls, he makes a strong impression with fans pretty much whenever he's on screen. Of course, everyone has their haters, but I think that most people generally agree that Zoro is that guy. What exactly is it that makes him so likable though? Is it because he's really cool and has not one but 3 swords? Well, on the one hand, yes. Zoro is your standard tough guy character trope done really well. Seeing him pull out his bandana and say these words, "Santoryu, Santoryu, Santoryu, Santoryu," yeah, that'll never get old. But on the other hand, Zoro has a lot of subtle writing that distinguishes him from that trope with an identity of his own. His common criticisms are that he's too simple or one-dimensional. While I do agree that he is simplistic, he's most definitely not basic. I also don't think that a character's value is inherently defined by their complexity or lack thereof. There's so much more to Zoro underneath the surface that makes him so captivating. He represents devotion and ambition. He is deeply aware of the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of the world. Most of all, he embodies the idea that dreams can evolve. Today, I'm going to break all of this down and more, so stick around as we discuss the one and only master of the 3-sword style, Roronoa Zoro. Loyalty is a common theme among the Strawhat Pirates, but I don't think many people will try to argue that no other crew member depicts loyalty like Zoro. From the very beginning, he was someone that devoted his whole being to anything he believed in. Whether it's people, his goals, or simply his personal philosophies, Zoro will commit 100% no matter what. He communicates this quality through his words and actions. To Zoro, promises are everything. We first see this in his dedication to carrying on Kuina's will, as well as the words that he spoke to her, but we also see more evidence as the story progresses. Early on, he's often questioned why he follows Luffy, despite Zoro appearing like a more capable leader. Aside from the obvious answer that Zoro genuinely respects Luffy, it comes down to the fact that Zoro simply told Luffy he would join his crew. No matter what happened after he made that pact, he would have stayed by Luffy's side because he will always honor his words with actions. The only time when he ever threatened to leave is when Luffy and the crew nearly disrespected this philosophy of his by considering to invite Usopp back in Water 7. Even in Little Garden, when Zoro said he was going to cut off his legs to escape the wax, he meant it. All of this is to say that Zoro is loyal not just to people, but to anything that he sets his mind to. So it's for that reason why Zoro, before his first appearance, had resolved to become the greatest swordsman in the world, no matter the cost. Before fighting Mihawk at the Baratier, he said, "When I decided to follow my dream, I had already discarded my life." Like Luffy, Zoro wants to be the best at something. He wants to get stronger and to test his strength in order to sharpen his skills. Even as a child, this ambitious mentality flowed through his veins. But how much does ambition really matter? What is the nature of his strength, and where does it come from? Zoro bears a special responsibility amongst the crew. He's not like Chopper or Sanji, whose respective skills as a doctor and chef are necessary for their survival. However, he's arguably just as important. Zoro is not simply a swordsman. He has a responsibility that only he can carry out. He is the silent backbone of the crew. He is their vigilance and their sharpened discipline. Zoro knows firsthand how dangerous and unpredictable the world can be. He was the first Straw Hat to get a taste of the Grand Line. Him challenging Mihawk when he did is basically the equivalent of East Blue Luffy fighting Hybrid Kaido. It's like trying to fight Consort Radahn at level 5. He didn't just lose the fight though, he nearly died within the first 50 chapters of his introduction. He only survived because Mihawk decided to let him live out of respect. Mihawk was brutal, but he taught Zoro a valuable lesson. He showed him firsthand how strong one needs to be in order to contend with the top tiers of the world. No one else in the crew suffered a devastating loss like that until the incident at Sabaody. Luffy lost a few times to some of his opponents, but he was able to bounce back and adapt in order to win. Zoro never had a chance to begin with. Another less dramatic example is found within his backstory. As funny as the legendary down D stairs joke can be, I actually think it was a really effective choice to have Kuina die the way that she did. A person's death is rarely as dramatic as Dr. Hiriluk's final speech or Belamir's sacrifice for her children. It's often something ordinary and, above all, sudden. Death isn't something that we can always prepare for. It can come at any moment. You could be talking with someone and making plans for the future one day, and the next day, they're gone. I guess seeing Kuina's death play out the way it did in the context of an absurdist shonen manga is naturally kind of funny, but it's also the reality of life. The fact that it happened shortly after their promise made it hit that much harder for 10-year-old Zoro. So because of that and his incident with Mihawk, Zoro is very aware that tomorrow is never guaranteed, not just because of the uncertainty of life, but also because there could always be someone stronger waiting just around the corner. This is where his drive for strength comes from. Each time that Zoro has confronted death in some capacity, he responds by training excessively. It's one of the biggest things that he has in common with Luffy. They both are motivated not just by the desire to be the best at something, but by the fear of losing those close to them. Although they differ slightly. Where Luffy is afraid of not being able to protect his friends, Zoro is afraid of his friends not being able to protect themselves. Zoro learned before anyone else that ambition and tenacity are not solely enough to guarantee prosperity, and so he pushes himself day in and day out. He's constantly on edge even when he's sleeping. This was pretty much the case in Whiskey Peak. He was the only one to sense the threat of the Baroque works, and he was prepared to spring to action when the rest of the Straw Hats weren't. And when Zoro is sleeping and or drunk, he's never caught off guard. Within the crew, he upholds strength and discipline. Aside from being Luffy's right hand, that is his role. He shoulders this burden so that they can be as loose and chaotic as they are, but he also makes sure to remind the crew of the seriousness of their journey when he needs to, because if they forget for too long, it could all come to an end in an instant. So I previously spoke about how Zoro's loyalty is expressed towards every aspect of his life that he cares about. However, when he was first introduced, there wasn't really anything he cared about other than himself and his dream. Of course, that changes. But how does he go from someone partially using the crew as a means to an end, to being willing to sacrifice his own life for their sake? This starts with Zoro's childhood. Even then, his sole purpose and motivation seemed to be realizing his ambition. Until meeting Kuina, he didn't have any close relationships. She was his first real friend, the first other person that he became loyal to. Her sudden death only reinforced his tunnel vision. Although he was then chasing his dream for the sake of someone else, he still had no other reason to live. As we've discussed, words and promises are extremely important to Zoro, but this is something he had forgotten in the pursuit of his goal. When he nearly died to Mihawk's blade, he realized that he wouldn't just have been failing Kuina, he would have also been failing Luffy. In that moment when he declared his loyalty to his captain, Zoro remembered what friendship meant to him. He realized that by placing his ambition above his friend, he was rejecting his own values. But his journey of self-discovery didn't end there. When he met Luffy, he had only been friends with one other person, so sailing amongst the crew was a very new experience for him. He had been prepared to make that journey alone, but suddenly he was surrounded by people that he shared an unspeakable bond with, and it took some time for Zoro's feelings to settle. Obviously, he still cared about becoming the world's greatest swordsman, but his priorities were slowly changing and he wasn't exactly sure why. There's an interesting scene that illustrates this internal conflict, and it actually takes place during a filler episode in Alabasta. In the episode, Zoro and Chopper are talking about how high maintenance Luffy can be as a captain. They're questioning what it means to be a team. Chopper asks Zoro why it is that he joined, and Zoro basically says that it just sort of happened. He later says that following Luffy gave him a new goal to strive for. But when Chopper asks what that goal is, Zoro isn't able to find the words. At that point, Zoro no longer only cared about his own dream, he cared about someone else's dream. With Kuina, the two of them had a mutual objective. They had the same dream, but Luffy had a different aspiration entirely. To care so deeply about something and someone else was completely unfamiliar to Zoro. He couldn't make sense of it, and yet he couldn't deny that something inside his soul had shifted. In Chapter 6, Zoro told Luffy that if he had to abandon his dream for any reason, he would see Luffy dead. But in chapter 485, when the Straw Hats and their captain are at the mercy of a foe much more powerful than them, Zoro puts his original dream to rest once and for all. In those moments of ultimate despair, his ideals are tested. He is prompted yet again to examine why he joined the crew and why he continues to follow Luffy. He is forced to confront that second goal of his and to decide what is most important. Zoro no longer needed time to think about his answer. He declares that and that he will effortlessly toss his ambition to the side to ensure that it happens. After their perilous journey across the Grand Line, the Straw Hat Pirates affirmed a level of conviction towards each other that proved to be powerful enough to inspire Zoro. Through watching Luffy follow his own dream, Zoro developed respect and admiration for another person that he didn't even know he was capable of. The man who was so quick to selfishly chase an opportunity without considering those around him was now offering his head in exchange for their survival. While his devotion to his dream never changed, the dream itself did. Zoro is someone who is unwaveringly devoted to everything that he believes in. He seeks strength not for glory or recognition, but to protect the wills of those close to him. Even to those with unimaginable skill, death can arrive when we least expect it. Zoro knows this better than anyone. Life is fragile, and no one is exempt from its callous nature, so it's important not to waste time and to live each moment in alignment with who you want to be. But it's not enough to be determined. It takes skill to be worthy of greatness, and skill is not something that can be rushed. You must be tenacious in the pursuit of your future. Just don't forget to consider those around you when striving for success. And like life itself, you never truly know what the future holds when it comes to your dreams, so let your beliefs evolve and offer you new direction. That is what Zoro's story is all about. That is what makes him special. That is the path of a warrior.